The moment the Mafia boss saw his pregnant maid kneeling in a circle of her own severed hair while his fiancée stood over her with scissors still open, he made a decision that would cost him his engagement, his mother's approval, and possibly his empire. And he made it without hesitation. But we need to go back 30 minutes to understand how power, jealousy, and cruelty collided in that bathroom corridor. Because what you're about to witness happens in the best families, behind the most expensive doors, where vulnerability meets violence, and no one thinks to intervene. Have you ever watched someone be destroyed simply for existing in the wrong place? Have you ever wondered what happens when love and loyalty face their true test? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll understand why some choices echo forever, and why the hair that falls tonight will grow back as something stronger. Evelyn Brooks had been folding linens in the East Wing laundry room when the summons came. 2 guards. No explanation, just the curt instruction to follow them upstairs. She was 8 months pregnant, swollen ankles aching, lower back screaming with every step up the marble staircase. The Blackwell estate in upstate New York stretched across 40,000 square feet of cold opulence, gilded mirrors, crystal chandeliers, imported Italian marble that clicked beneath her worn shoes. She had worked here for 9 months, long enough to learn which hallways to avoid, which family members never made eye contact, which doors stayed locked, long enough to fall in love with the man who owned it all. Long enough to carry his child. The guards said nothing as they escorted her past the grand library, past the formal dining room where 20 people could eat in silence, past the portrait gallery where generations of Blackwell men stared down with identical expressions of cold authority. Evelyn's hands moved instinctively to her belly, a protective gesture she couldn't control anymore. The baby kicked against her palm as if sensing her fear. They stopped outside a narrow corridor near the master suite. Veronica Ashford was waiting. Adrian Blackwell's fiancée stood in the center of the brightly lit hallway, arms crossed, designer heels clicking as she shifted her weight. She wore cream silk that probably cost more than Evelyn earned in a year. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight chignon, her makeup flawless, her expression carved from ice. She had been watching Evelyn for weeks, following her movements through the estate with eyes that catalogued every interaction, every lingering glance between Evelyn and Adrian, every tiny moment of connection that shouldn't exist between a Mafia boss and his staff. Jealousy had been festering in Veronica like an infection, growing darker with each passing day, feeding on suspicion and wounded pride. Tonight she had decided to excise it. "Bring her inside," Veronica said softly. The guards obeyed. They always obeyed the family. The bathroom corridor was impossibly narrow, designed for servants to move through unseen. Harsh fluorescent panels overhead eliminated every shadow, every hiding place, every mercy. 8 guards lined the walls now, 4 on each side, standing at attention, eyes forward, faces blank. They were paid to protect the Blackwell family. They were not paid to protect a pregnant maid from a scorned fiancé. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The corridor had one entrance, one exit, and Veronica controlled both. "Do you know why you're here?" Veronica asked, circling slowly. Evelyn shook her head. Her voice had abandoned her. Veronica smiled. It was the kind of smile that preceded violence. "Because you forgot your place. Because you've been walking around my home, carrying something that makes you think you belong here." She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the confined space. "Let me remind you what you actually are." She produced the scissors from her pocket. Professional hairdressing scissors, 8 inches long. Chrome steel that caught the light like a blade. Evelyn's breath stopped. "On your knees," Veronica said quietly. The guards watched, silent, unmoving, complicit in their stillness. Evelyn lowered herself slowly, awkwardly, belly making the descent difficult. Cold marble bit through her thin uniform. Her hand stayed on her stomach, the only thing that mattered now. Veronica moved behind her, gathering a thick section of Evelyn's dark hair in one hand. "Hair grows back," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But dignity, status, knowing your place?" She raised the scissors. "Those lessons are permanent." The door at the end of the corridor had a lock. Veronica turned the deadbolt with her free hand. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Now," Veronica continued, scissors poised, "let me teach you something about hierarchy. And if you think this is where someone intervenes, where mercy arrives, where justice happens naturally, you need to keep watching, because what comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew about power, protection, and the price of choosing love over legacy. Don't look away now." The first cut was loud, deliberate, final. Hair slid down Evelyn's shoulder and pooled on the marble floor. Veronica lifted another section of hair, this time from the right side of Evelyn's head. The scissors opened with a soft, metallic whisper. "Look at me," Veronica commanded. Evelyn kept her eyes down. Her hands remained locked over her belly, feeling the baby shift and turn inside her, oblivious to the cruelty happening outside. That small movement, the flutter of a tiny foot against her palm, was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I said, look at me." Slowly, Evelyn raised her head. Their eyes met in the mirror mounted on the wall ahead. Veronica's reflection showed satisfaction. Evelyn showed nothing. That blankness made Veronica angrier. "You think carrying his child makes you special?" Veronica's voice dropped to a hiss. "You think a pregnancy earns you a place in this family?" She tightened her grip on Evelyn's hair, yanking hard enough to make her gasp. "You're a womb, a temporary vessel, that's all."
Evelyn said nothing.
The second cut came faster, more violent. A thick chunk of hair separated from her scalp and fell heavily to the floor. Then another, and another. The guard shifted. One looked away. Another's jaw tightened. But they remained frozen along the walls, hands clasped behind their backs, trained to ignore anything that didn't threaten the family directly. A maid's humiliation didn't qualify as a threat. Veronica circled around to Evelyn's left side, scissors clicking open and closed like mechanical jaws. "Do you know what I've been watching for the past 3 months?" She didn't wait for an answer. "The way he looks at you, the way he touches your shoulder when he passes, the way his voice changes when he says your name." One. More hair fell. The pile around Evelyn's knees grew taller, darker, evidence of her unravelling presented in strands and waves she had grown for 5 years. "He thinks I don't notice," Veronica continued, cutting now without precision. "Just destruction. He thinks I'm too busy planning the wedding, managing appearances, playing the perfect fiancée, but I see everything." She grabbed Evelyn's chin, forcing her to look up. "I see you." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she refused to speak. Begging would give Veronica what she wanted, proof that this mattered, that she could be broken. So instead, Evelyn focused on the only thing that did matter, the life inside her. She pressed her palms against her belly, willing her daughter to stay calm, to stay safe, to survive whatever came next. The memory hit her suddenly, uninvited, 6 months ago. Late summer, the estate gardens after midnight. She had been working a double shift, exhausted, cutting through the rose garden to reach the staff quarters faster. Adrian had been there, standing alone beneath an arbour, staring at nothing. She had tried to slip past unnoticed, but he had spoken her name. Just that, Evelyn. She had stopped. "Why are you always running?" he had asked. "I'm staff," she had answered. "We're supposed to be invisible." He had stepped closer, and she had seen something in his face she hadn't expected. Loneliness. Real, crushing loneliness that money and power couldn't fix. "What if I don't want you to be invisible?" That conversation had lasted 3 hours. By dawn, everything had changed. They had been careful, stolen moments, locked doors, whispered conversations in empty hallways. He had told her things he told no one else, how his father had raised him to lead with fear, how his mother valued legacy over humanity, how he sometimes looked at his own reflection and saw a stranger. She had told him about the family who disowned her at 16, the college scholarship she lost, the dreams she had abandoned to survive. He had seen her, really seen her, not as staff, not as a means to an end, as Evelyn. And when she discovered she was pregnant 2 months later, he had held her face in his hands and said one word: "Stay." The memory shattered as Veronica yanked her head back violently. "Where did you go just now?" Veronica demanded, cutting close to Evelyn's scalp now, leaving patches of exposed skin. "Remembering him? Remembering how he touched you?" She laughed, cold and sharp. "He touched me too. Do you want to compare notes?" Evelyn's reflection stared back at her from the mirror, half her head bare now, the other half still thick with dark hair waiting to be taken. She looked destroyed. She looked like proof of Veronica's power, but her hands never left her belly. Veronica noticed. Protecting it won't change anything. That child gives you nothing. Status doesn't come from a womb. It comes from a ring. She held up her left hand, diamond engagement ring, catching the harsh overhead light. "This is power. You? You're just a mistake he'll eventually erase." The scissors moved to the back of Evelyn's head. More hair fell. The guards watched with increasing discomfort, but not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. Veronica worked in silence now, focused, methodical. Each cut removing more of Evelyn's appearance, more of her dignity, more of the person she had been when she walked into this corridor. Hair piled around them both. On the floor, on Evelyn's shoulders, on her lap where her hands still protected the baby from seeing any of this. "When I'm done," Veronica said quietly, almost conversationally, "you're going to walk out of here and understand something fundamental. You don't belong in his world, you never did. And tonight everyone will see exactly what you are, a bald, pregnant servant who forgot which door was hers. She grabbed the last section of long hair on Evelyn's head and raised the scissors one final time. And that was when the corridor door opened. The door opened, not slammed, not rushed, just opened with the kind of deliberate calm that made every person in that corridor freeze where they stood. Footsteps echoed once, twice, 3 times, then stopped. Adrian Blackwell stood in the doorway, black suit perfectly tailored, white shirt crisp despite the late hour, expression completely unreadable. He looked like he had simply walked in from a business dinner, composed, controlled, every inch the man who commanded an empire built on fear and loyalty. Behind him, Catherine Blackwell appeared, her silver hair swept into an elegant twist, pearls at her throat, cashmere cardigan draped over her shoulders. She had arrived 30 minutes earlier for what she assumed would be a routine inspection of the estate's operations. Instead, she now stood in a servant's corridor witnessing something that would require immediate damage control. Time stopped. Adrian's eyes moved first to the floor, where dark hair lay scattered across white marble like evidence at a crime scene. Then to Evelyn, kneeling in the center of that circle, one side of her head completely bare, the other still waiting for the scissors. Then to Veronica, frozen mid-cut, metal blade still open in her raised hand, mouth parted in surprise. The 8 guards straightened against the walls, suddenly aware they had witnessed something they should have stopped. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence stretched so thin it could shatter. Adrian's gaze travelled across the scene with lethal precision, cataloguing every detail. The locked door behind him, the defensive positioning of the guards, Evelyn's hands pressed against her pregnant belly, the scissors in his fiancée's grip. His expression never changed. That was somehow worse than anger. Veronica recovered first. She lowered the scissors slowly, adopting a tone of wounded dignity. Adrian, thank God you're here. Veronica gestured at Evelyn with false exasperation. She disrespected me in front of the household staff this afternoon. I was simply teaching her boundaries, reminding her of her place. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. They had seen no such incident. They had seen Veronica hunt Evelyn through the estate like prey. Catherine's face hardened into the expression she wore when managing publicity disasters. She saw scandal, not injustice. She saw tabloid headlines and ruined alliances and wealthy families asking quiet questions about the Blackwell household's ability to maintain order. Veronica, she said sharply, you should have come to me first. This is inappropriate. Inappropriate. Not cruel. Not inhuman, just poor form. Adrian still said nothing. He stepped fully into the corridor, and every person there felt the temperature drop. His silence carried more weight than shouting ever could. It was the silence of absolute authority deciding exactly how much mercy to extend. Veronica tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. She's been flaunting herself around the estate, Adrian, making eyes at you, pretending she has some kind of claim. I was protecting your reputation, protecting us. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he moved. He crossed the corridor in 4 strides, brushing past Veronica without acknowledging her existence. He stopped directly in front of Evelyn, who still knelt on the cold marble, hands protecting her belly, eyes downcast. She looked small, vulnerable, destroyed. Without a word, Adrian removed his suit jacket. The motion was fluid, practiced, revealing the shoulder holster he always wore beneath. He draped the jacket carefully over Evelyn's shoulders, covering her partially shaved head, her shaking hands, her swollen belly. The fabric still held his warmth. Evelyn looked up then, shock breaking through her careful blankness. Catherine inhaled sharply. Adrian, what are you doing? He didn't answer his mother. Instead, he held out his hand to Evelyn, palm up, waiting. After a long moment, she placed her trembling fingers in his. He helped her to her feet slowly, supporting her weight as she rose awkwardly, 8 months pregnant and unsteady. The guards watched this reversal of power with growing understanding. Their allegiance was shifting before Veronica's eyes. Adrian, Veronica's voice cracked slightly. She's staff. She's nobody. You can't possibly... Take the scissors from her, Adrian said quietly to the nearest guard. The guard moved immediately, pulling the scissors from Veronica's loosening grip. She didn't resist. She was too busy trying to comprehend what was happening. Adrian turned then, still holding Evelyn's hand, and faced his fiancée directly for the first time since entering. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, quiet, absolutely lethal. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could do this in my home, to someone under my protection, and I would simply overlook it? She's a servant, Veronica repeated, but her confidence was crumbling. You can't throw away our engagement over a servant. You're right, Adrian said. I'm not throwing it away over a servant. Relief flickered across Veronica's face. I'm ending it because you tortured a pregnant woman for the crime of existing. He paused, letting that truth settle over everyone present. And because you did it in my house, with my guards watching, believing you had the authority. Catherine stepped forward. Adrian, think about what you're saying. The Ashford alliance is over. His voice cut through her objection like a blade. Effective immediately. Veronica's face strained of all colour. You can't do this, my family. We'll be informed in the morning. Adrian's hand tightened slightly around Evelyn's fingers. Right now you're going to leave this estate. The guards will escort you to your room. You have 30 minutes to pack essentials. Everything else will be sent.
Adrian, please. Veronica's voice broke. I love you.
I was protecting what's ours. He looked at her then with something close to pity. There is no ours. There never was. He turned back to Evelyn, his expression softening in a way that made Catherine Blackwell take a sharp breath. He touched Evelyn's face gently, checking her eyes, making sure she was truly present and unharmed beyond the obvious. Then he looked at every guard in that corridor, every witness to what had happened here, and he said one word that changed everything. Mine. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Mine. Adrian's voice carried down the corridor, past the frozen guards, past his mother's rigid posture, past Veronica's crumbling facade. He said it once, but everyone heard it twice, once with their ears, once with their understanding of what it meant for the hierarchy they had always known. She carries my child, Adrian continued, his tone steady, absolute. Anyone who harms her, humiliates her, or threatens her in any way is my enemy, not my opposition, not my problem. My enemy. Veronica's face lost all remaining colour. Her lips moved but produced no sound. This revelation, delivered here now in front of guards and his mother and the woman she had just destroyed, made her cruelty public record, made her the villain in a story that would travel through every corner of this estate by morning. Catherine's hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles white. Adrian. A word. No. He didn't look at her. His attention stayed fixed on Evelyn, checking her face for signs of shock or injury beyond the obvious. Whatever you need to say, you can say here. You're throwing away our alliance with the Ashford family for a servant? Catherine's voice shook with barely controlled rage. Do you understand what you're doing? The connections we'll lose? The vulnerability you're creating? Adrian finally turned to face his mother. His expression held no anger, no defensiveness, just cold, immovable logic. I'm choosing my child. The alliance was your priority, Catherine. It was never mine. You built your world on contracts and leverage. I'm building mine differently. By destroying your engagement over, Catherine's gaze flicked to Evelyn with open disdain. Over this? By protecting what's mine. Adrian's jaw tightened, and by removing anyone who thinks cruelty is an acceptable form of household management. He gestured to the two nearest guards. Escort Miss Ashford to her suite. She has 30 minutes to pack essentials. After that, she leaves this estate permanently. Yes, sir. The guards moved immediately, flanking Veronica on either side. Veronica's shock transformed into desperate fury. You can't do this. My father will receive a formal notification in the morning, Adrian interrupted, along with security footage of what happened in this corridor tonight. I'm sure he'll understand why the engagement is terminated. Security footage? Veronica's voice climbed higher. You're going to show him. You're going to humiliate me. You humiliated yourself. Adrian's voice remained level, which somehow made the words more devastating. I'm simply providing documentation. Veronica's desperation shifted tactics. She straightened her spine, adopted the haughty tone she used with staff. You think I didn't know? I've known about the pregnancy for 3 weeks. I've been watching you sneak into the East Wing, watching her waddle around with your bastard growing inside her, watching you pretend this meant nothing. 1. The guards hesitated, hands on her elbows, waiting for Adrian's signal to continue. Tonight was calculated, Veronica continued, voice breaking. Every cut was planned. I wanted her to understand what she was, a temporary inconvenience. I wanted you to see her destroyed and remember why you chose me, why you needed me. Catherine's expression flickered with something between horror and recognition. She had used similar tactics once, decades ago, to secure her own position, but she had been subtler, smarter. Adrian studied Veronica with the cold assessment of a man evaluating a failed investment. 3 weeks. You knew for 3 weeks that she carried my child, and your response was to torture her in a locked corridor. He paused. That level of cruelty is a liability I can't afford. I love you, Veronica whispered. Everything I did was because I love you. No. Adrian's voice remained quiet, final. Everything you did was because you value possession over people. There's a difference. He nodded to the guards. Take her now. They moved, guiding Veronica toward the door. She fought their grip, twisting back to look at Adrian one last time. She'll never fit in your world. She'll never be what I could have been. You're making a mistake that will cost you everything. Then it's my mistake to make. Adrian turned away from her dismissal, more complete than any shouting could achieve. Veronica's screaming faded down the hallway. A door slammed. Then silence returned, heavier than before. Adrian moved back to Evelyn, who had remained completely still through the entire confrontation. His jacket draped over her like armor. He touched her shoulder carefully. Are you hurt? Beyond the obvious? Evelyn shook her head. Her voice came out rough, unused. The baby's fine. She's still moving. She? Adrian's expression softened fractionally. The ultrasound last week. I didn't know if you wanted... Evelyn stopped, suddenly aware of Catherine's burning stare. I want to know everything, Adrian said quietly. He cupped Evelyn's face with both hands, examining her partially shaved head with barely contained rage. I'm sorry, I should have seen this coming. Should have protected you better. You couldn't have known. I should have known. His thumb traced her cheekbone gently. The moment Veronica realized about the pregnancy, I should have anticipated this. I won't make that mistake again. Catherine finally found her voice, each word sharp as glass. So that's it. You choose her, announce it publicly, destroy an alliance that took months to negotiate, and expect what? That I'll simply accept this? Adrian met his mother's eyes with the same unflinching calm. I expect you'll do what you've always done. Calculate the cost, assess the damage, and adapt. Because I'm not asking permission, Catherine. I'm telling you how things are now. Think about what you just witnessed. Have you ever seen justice delivered so swiftly, so completely? Have you ever wondered what it takes for someone to choose love over legacy? Drop a comment below about what you think happens next, and make sure you're subscribed because the fallout from tonight is only beginning. Catherine's silence stretched between them, far more dangerous than Veronica's screaming had been. She watched Adrian tend to Evelyn with the gentleness of someone handling something precious, and in that moment, Catherine Blackwell began calculating exactly how to destroy what her son had chosen to protect. 3 hours had passed since Veronica's removal from the estate. 3 hours since Adrian had escorted Evelyn to a guest suite on the second floor, far from the servants' quarters, with windows overlooking the gardens and a private bathroom with a door that locked from the inside. He had insisted she rest, promised a doctor would examine her in the morning, arranged for dinner to be brought to her room. Evelyn had nodded through all of it, numb, still wearing his jacket over her destroyed hair. Now she sat on the edge of an antique bed worth more than her entire childhood home, running her fingers over the uneven patches of her scalp. The mirror across the room showed her reflection, a stranger with half a head of hair, pregnant belly straining against a maid's uniform, eyes hollow with exhaustion and shock. She should feel safe. Adrian had claimed her publicly. Veronica was gone. The guards had witnessed everything, but safety in this world required more than one man's declaration. Down the hall, in Adrian's private study, Catherine Blackwell poured herself 2 fingers of scotch and waited for her son to arrive. She had given him time to settle his pregnant maid, time to believe the crisis had passed. Now they needed to discuss reality. Adrian entered without knocking. He had changed clothes, black shirt, no jacket, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, younger than his 34 years. Vulnerable in a way that made Catherine's chest tighten with maternal instinct and cold calculation. Sit, she said. I'd rather stand. Catherine sipped her scotch, studying him over the rim of her glass. I'm not angry about Veronica, she overstepped catastrophically. Ending the engagement was the correct decision. Adrian's eyebrows rose slightly. He had expected a fight. I'm furious about how you ended it, Catherine continued. In a servant's corridor, in front of 8 guards who will tell 8 different versions of tonight's events by breakfast. You made a spectacle of your feelings, Adrian. You've shown weakness. I showed strength. Adrian's voice hardened. I protected what's mine. Love is a liability in our world, Catherine said sharply. The moment people know what you care about, they know how to hurt you. Your father taught you that. I taught you that. Tonight, you handed every enemy we have a weapon aimed directly at that girl's heart. Adrian crossed to the window, staring out at darkness. So I should have let Veronica finish. Let her destroy Evelyn completely to preserve some illusion of detachment. You should have handled it privately, quietly. ended the engagement through proper channels, moved the girl somewhere safe and discreet before announcing anything. Catherine set down her glass with deliberate care. Instead, you claimed her like a prize in front of witnesses, made her a target. She was already a target. Veronica knew about the pregnancy for weeks. Exactly. Catherine stood, moving closer to her son. Which is why we need to act now, before others decide to test your commitment. She paused, letting her next words land with full weight. Evelyn needs to leave by morning. Quietly, with substantial financial compensation, Adrian turned slowly. Excuse me? The child can be raised elsewhere. Connecticut, Maine, somewhere far from this life. You can visit discreetly, maintain a relationship on your terms without exposing her to the dangers of being known as your weakness. She's not leaving. Adrian's voice dropped to the tone he used when negotiating non-negotiable terms. And our daughter will be raised here with both parents. Then you're condemning them both. Catherine's expression remained cool, almost sympathetic. Do you think Veronica is the only person in your world who uses cruelty as currency? Do you think your enemies will see a pregnant maid and think off limits? They'll see leverage. Opportunity. I can protect them. Not from everything. Not every moment. Not forever. Catherine stepped closer, voice softening into something more dangerous than anger. Concern wrapped in manipulation. I raised you in this life, Adrian. I know what it costs. Your father's enemies came after me twice before you were born. Once with poison. Once with a car that lost its brakes on a mountain road. I survived because I was born into this world, trained for it. She's a maid from nowhere with no defenses. Adrian's jaw clenched. So your solution is to hide her away? Treat her like a shameful secret? My solution is to keep her breathing. Catherine's voice turned cold. Because if she stays here, in this house, as your acknowledged partner, I cannot guarantee her safety. Not from our enemies, and not from me. The words landed like a physical blow. Adrian stared at his mother, searching her face for the bluff, the tactical exaggeration. He found none. That's not a threat, Catherine clarified quietly. It's a promise wrapped in pragmatism. I will do whatever is necessary to protect this family's position. If keeping her here creates vulnerability, if it invites attacks or weakens your authority, I will remove the problem. Quietly, permanently. Because that's what mothers do in our world. We protect our children from their own mistakes. She's not a mistake. Then prove it. Catherine picked up her scotch again, voice returning to businesslike efficiency. Secure her safety. Maintain your power. Visit when you can. In 5 years, when our position is stronger, you can bring her back if you still want to. But right now, keeping her here is choosing sentiment over survival. Adrian's hands curled into fists at his sides. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to fight, to keep Evelyn exactly where he could see her. But Catherine's logic was sound in the worst way. Their world did run on leverage and weakness. His public claim had painted a target on Evelyn's back. I need time to think, he said finally. You have until morning. After that, I make the decision for you. Catherine left him standing in the study, surrounded by his father's books and his own impossible choice. Down the hall, pressed against the wall of her guest room, Evelyn had heard enough. The suite shared a ventilation system with Adrian's study. The voices had carried through the walls with perfect, devastating clarity. Catherine's words echoed in her mind. If she stays here, I cannot guarantee her safety. Not from our enemies, and not from me. Evelyn looked down at her belly, at the baby moving beneath her hands. Her daughter deserved better than becoming a bargaining chip. Adrian deserved better than choosing between love and legacy while his mother dismantled everything from the inside. She made a decision that shattered her heart but saved what she loved most. She would leave before dawn, disappear before Adrian had to choose, remove herself from the equation so he could rebuild without her as the weakness everyone would exploit. By sunrise, she would be gone. 4:45 in the morning. The sky outside Evelyn's window held that particular darkness that comes just before dawn. Not quite black anymore, but not willing to admit light either. She had spent the past 2 hours preparing to vanish. The scarf came from her own meagre belongings. A faded blue cotton square she wrapped around her head, covering the patches of bare scalp where Veronica's scissors had done their work. It didn't hide everything. Nothing could hide the unevenness, the random tufts of remaining hair, the evidence of last night's cruelty. But it was better than walking through the world completely exposed. Her belongings fit into a single canvas bag, 3 changes of clothes, a photograph of her mother before the disownment, $47 in cash, the ultrasound image of her daughter that she kept folded in her pocket like a talisman. Adrian's jacket still lay draped across the chair. She touched it once, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. Then she forced herself to walk away. The note took 3 attempts to write. First version, too much explanation. Second version, too emotional. Third version, simple truth that would hurt less than elaborate justification. I won't be the reason you lose everything. Take care of our daughter in whatever way keeps you both safe. Thank you for seeing me. She left it on the pillow where he would find it immediately. The knock on her door came at 5 o'clock exactly. Evelyn opened it to find Margaret, the older housekeeper who had worked at the estate for 23 years. She had kind eyes and arthritic hands and had never once treated Evelyn like she was invisible. I brought you something, Margaret whispered, pressing a small envelope into Evelyn's palm. It's not much. $300. My emergency fund. You'll need it more than I will. Evelyn's eyes filled. I can't take this. You can, and you will. Margaret's voice was firm despite the whisper. I've been watching that boy's mother circle you like a hawk circles prey. You're making the right choice, even if it tears you apart. She glanced down the hallway. Service entrance is clear for the next 10 minutes. After that, morning staff arrives. They moved quickly through the silent house, avoiding the main corridors, sticking to the narrow passages designed for servants to move unseen. The service entrance opened onto a delivery alley that smelled of garbage and exhaust. Margaret hugged her once, fierce and brief. You're stronger than you think, Margaret said, and that baby is lucky to have you. Then Evelyn was walking away from the only place that had felt like home in years, pregnant belly making her gait awkward, canvas bag bouncing against her hip, wrapped in scarves that couldn't quite hide what she had become. The small town of Ravenswood sat 3 miles from the Blackwell estate, population 4,200, 1 main street, 2 churches, a handful of businesses that served the wealthy families in their hilltop mansions. Evelyn had been here twice before, both times running errands for the kitchen staff. Now she walked those streets in pre-dawn darkness with nowhere to go. Her family had disowned her 16 months ago when they discovered she was pregnant and unmarried. Her mother had called her a disgrace. Her father had called her worse. The door to their home in Buffalo had closed with such finality that Evelyn still heard the echo sometimes when she closed her eyes. She had no friends outside the estate, no contacts who could help without asking questions she couldn't answer. Reality crashed over her in waves as dawn began breaking across the horizon. 8 months pregnant, partially bald, no home, $347 to her name, no identification beyond a driver's license that listed an address where she no longer existed. She found the Women's Crisis Center by accident, a modest brick building tucked behind the Methodist Church. Hand-painted sign identifying it as Hope Harbor. The irony of the name wasn't lost on her. The night worker who answered her knock was young, maybe 25, with tired eyes and genuine compassion. Are you in immediate danger? Evelyn shook her head. Lying felt necessary. I just need somewhere safe to stay for a few days, until I figure things out. Of course. Come in. The worker guided her inside, past rooms where other women slept behind closed doors, past a small kitchen that smelled of old coffee and industrial cleaner. I'm going to need to ask you some questions for our records. Is that okay? Evelyn nodded, already constructing the lie. Abusive boyfriend, left in the middle of the night, hair cut in a fight, baby coming soon. All of it true enough in structure, false enough in details. The worker didn't press when Evelyn's answers grew vague. She had seen enough trauma to recognize when someone couldn't bear to speak truth aloud yet. They gave her a small room with a twin bed, a lamp, a window that faced east. Evelyn sat on the edge of that bed and watched sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Her hands rested on her belly, feeling her daughter move and stretch and kick against her palm. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I promise. We're going to figure this out. You'll be safe, that's all that matters. But her voice broke on the last word, and the tears she had held back since yesterday finally came. Back at the Blackwell estate, Adrian entered Evelyn's guest room at 6:30, coffee in hand, prepared to spend the morning ensuring she felt safe and protected. The room was empty. His jacket remained on the chair. The bed was made with hospital corners, and on the pillow lay a note in careful handwriting that made his chest constrict. He read it 3 times before his brain accepted what his eyes were seeing. She was gone. Catherine found him there 10 minutes later, holding that note like evidence, jaw clenched so tight the muscles jumped. She said nothing. Her satisfaction needed no words. The problem had solved itself. The girl had made the choice Catherine would have forced if given another day. Adrian looked at his mother with an expression she had never seen before. Not anger, not grief, but something colder and infinitely more dangerous. If you think this ends here, he said quietly. "You don't know me at all. What would you do if you watched someone sacrifice everything to protect the person they love? How far would you go to find them again?" Share your thoughts in the comments. And hit subscribe because this story is about to take a turn that will change everything you think you know about sacrifice and second chances. Catherine watched her son walk out of that empty room, and for the first time in 30 years, she wondered if she had miscalculated. Adrian started in the kitchen. 7 staff members worked morning shift, 2 cooks, 3 servers, 2 cleaners. He questioned them one by one in the walk-in pantry where conversation stayed private. His voice remained level, controlled, but his eyes held something that made even the longest-serving employees nervous. "But did you last see Evelyn Brooks? Did she mention leaving? Did anyone help her?" The answers came back identical. No one had seen anything. No one knew anything. No one wanted to admit they had watched a pregnant woman disappear into pre-dawn darkness without saying a word. Margaret lasted 47 minutes before her conscience broke. Adrian found her in the linen closet, folding sheets with hands that shook slightly. She was 62 years old, had survived 2 husbands and 1 bout of cancer, and had never been afraid of anything in her life. But when Adrian closed the door behind him, she saw something in his face that made her understand why men twice his size called him Sir. "Where is she?" His question came quietly. Margaret's hands stilled on the pillowcase. "I don't know where she went, only that she left through the service entrance around 5 this morning. You helped her." It was not a question. Margaret straightened her spine, meeting his eyes directly. "I gave her some money, told her the coast was clear. That's all." "Did she say where she was going?" "No, and I didn't ask. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone running is not knowing their destination." Margaret paused, then added with surprising gentleness, "She loves you. That's why she left. So you wouldn't have to choose between her and everything else." Adrian's jaw tightened. "She should have let me make that choice." "Would you have chosen differently than she feared?" The question hit harder than accusation. Adrian turned away, staring at shelves of folded linens that suddenly seemed like the most pointless things in the world. "Tell me which direction she walked." "Toward town. That's all I saw." He left Margaret standing in that closet and began mobilizing resources with the methodical precision that built his empire. Phone calls to contacts in 3 counties, requests for security footage from businesses along the main road, alerts to private investigators who owed him favors. He didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. Just activated a network that could find anyone anywhere within hours. Except he had been raised to separate love from power, to keep the 2 worlds distinct, never overlapping, never vulnerable to each other. His father had taught him that lesson with brutal clarity. Care about nothing you can't afford to lose. His mother had reinforced it daily through her own cold pragmatism. Evelyn had changed that. She had made him want something beyond control, beyond empire, beyond the careful distance he maintained from everyone. And his public declaration last night had been dramatic, satisfying, necessary, but insufficient. He should have secured her safety first, should have moved her somewhere protected before confronting Veronica, should have anticipated that his mother would see her as a problem requiring elimination. He had chosen visibility over security, love over strategy, and Evelyn had paid the price by believing she had to vanish to save him. Catherine found him in his study 3 hours later, surrounded by maps of the surrounding counties, phone pressed to his ear, expression carved from stone. She waited until he finished the call. "You need to eat something. I need to find her." "Adrian, she made her choice, because you made it impossible for her to stay." His voice stayed calm, which somehow made the accusation more damning. "You stood in my study and told her through those walls that you would kill her if she didn't leave. Don't pretend this was her decision." Catherine's face hardened. "I gave her the truth. This world destroys soft things. I was protecting you both. You were protecting your version of what I should be." Adrian stood, moving to face his mother directly. "But here's your truth, Catherine. If anything happens to her, if she's hurt, if she's in danger, if she suffers because you made her run, we're done. Not just distance, not just cold silence, finished. You'll never meet your granddaughter. You'll never see me again. I will cut you out completely." Catherine's breath caught. In 34 years, her son had never threatened her, never drawn that kind of line. "You don't mean that," she said quietly. "Test me and find out." He left her standing in his study, and for the first time since her husband's death, Catherine Blackwell felt genuinely afraid. The search consumed the next 72 hours. Adrian moved through women's shelters with photographs he had pulled from estate security footage, hospital emergency rooms, churches with outreach programs. Every place a pregnant woman with no resources might seek help. Evelyn had vanished like smoke. No credit card transactions, no phone records, no digital footprint whatsoever. She was using only cash, avoiding cameras, moving carefully through a world that tracked everything. His empire could find cartel leaders hiding in foreign countries, could trace money through 17 shell corporations, could locate witnesses who had disappeared into federal protection, but it couldn't find one pregnant woman who desperately didn't want to be found. Adrian's frustration grew with each dead end, each shelter worker who shook their head, each hospital that had no record of her admission. He slept in 2-hour intervals, stopped eating regular meals, ran on coffee and determination and the growing fear that she was out there, alone, vulnerable, believing she had done the right thing. On day 4, the break came. Security footage from a convenience store 2 towns over, time-stamped at 11:43 the previous evening. A pregnant woman in a blue headscarf purchasing bottled water and crackers with cash. The angle was poor, the image grainy, but Adrian recognized the way she moved, the protective curve of her hand over her belly. He traced her backward from that store. Found more footage. A women's crisis center called Hope Harbor, located behind a Methodist church in Ravenswood. He drove there himself, heart pounding against his ribs for the first time in years. The same young night worker answered his knock, took one look at his expensive suit and careful desperation, and her expression shifted to professional caution. "I'm looking for someone," Adrian said. "Evelyn Brooks. 8 months pregnant. She would have arrived 4 or 5 days ago." The worker's face gave nothing away. "We don't share information about our residents. I'm not here to hurt her. I'm here to help her, to bring her home. That's what they all say." Adrian pulled out his phone, showed the worker a photograph. Him and Evelyn in the estate gardens, her laughing at something he had said, his hand resting gently on her belly. The image was 3 months old, stolen by a security camera, but it showed truth. The worker's expression softened slightly. "She was here. She left yesterday morning. Didn't say where she was going. I'm sorry." Adrian stood on that doorstep, staring at the empty building where Evelyn had slept for 4 nights before disappearing again, and felt something close to despair. Where had she gone now? Was she safe? And how many times would she run before he could make her understand that she was the empire worth protecting? The storm hit upstate New York at 7:30 in the evening, on day 5 of Evelyn's disappearance. Weather reports had warned of severe thunderstorms, but the reality exceeded predictions. Rain fell in sheets so thick visibility dropped to mere feet. Lightning cracked the sky like breaking glass. Thunder shook windows in their frames. Within 30 minutes, roads flooded, power lines snapped, and the entire county went dark. Evelyn had left Hope Harbor that morning, spooked by a visitor asking questions about a pregnant woman. The worker hadn't given her name, but Evelyn recognized the description. Expensive suit, desperate eyes, photograph of them together. Adrian was close, too close. She had walked for hours, heading nowhere in particular, just away. Her feet ached, her back screamed. The baby pressed heavy and low, making every step harder than the last. By the time the storm rolled in, she was miles from anything resembling shelter. The abandoned mill sat at the edge of town, forgotten infrastructure from when Ravenswood had manufacturing jobs and economic hope. 3 stories of crumbling brick, broken windows, graffiti-covered walls. Evelyn stumbled through the doorway as the first lightning strike illuminated the skeletal structure. She made it to the 2nd floor before the pain hit. Not the usual discomfort, not the false contractions that had plagued her for weeks. Real pain that started in her lower back and wrapped around her entire abdomen like a vice. She grabbed the nearest wall, breathing through it, waiting for it to pass. It didn't pass. The next contraction came 7 minutes later, then 6, then 5. Early labor, too early by 3 weeks, but stress and exhaustion and terror had pushed her body past its limits. The baby was coming whether Evelyn was ready or not. She had no phone, no way to call for help. No one who knew where she had gone. The power was out across the entire county, leaving her in darkness broken only by lightning flashes that turned the abandoned building into something from a nightmare. Rain poured through holes in the roof, creating puddles on the concrete floor. Wind howled through broken windows. Evelyn sank to her knees on the cold floor, one hand braced against the wall, the other pressed to her belly. "Not yet," she whispered to her daughter. "Please, not yet. Not like this." But the baby had her own timeline. Adrian had been driving for 3 hours, following nothing but instinct and a conversation he half remembered from 2 months ago. They had been in the gardens at midnight, Evelyn showing him constellations she had learned as a child. She had mentioned loving old buildings, forgotten places where nobody looked for you. There's something beautiful about spaces that used to matter, she had said, about walls that held people's dreams before they crumbled. He thought of that now, turning his car down roads the GPS claimed didn't exist, searching for the kind of forgotten structure that someone running would choose. The old mill appeared through the rain like a ghost. He almost drove past, almost dismissed it as too obvious, too dangerous. But something made him stop, some instinct that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with knowing Evelyn in ways that transcended reason. He heard her before he saw her, a cry that cut through thunder and rain, pain made audible, desperation given voice. He ran toward that sound, taking stairs 2 at a time, heart slamming against his ribs. The second floor was dark except for lightning flashes. In those brief moments of illumination, he saw her. Evelyn knelt on the concrete, soaked from rain pouring through the ceiling, headscarf gone, bare patches of scalp visible, face twisted with pain, hands clutching her belly. She looked up as he burst through the doorway, and their eyes met in the darkness. "Adrian," she gasped. Then another contraction hit, and she doubled over with a sound that tore him apart. He crossed to her in 3 strides, dropping to his knees, hands finding her face. "I've got you. You're okay. I've got you. The baby's coming." Her voice shook. "I can't. It's too soon. I don't know what to do. How far apart are the contractions?" 3 minutes, maybe less. Adrian pulled out his phone, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The call connected, but the dispatcher's voice kept cutting out. "Storm interference. Flooding. Emergency services stretched too thin." "We're at the old Ravenswood Mill," Adrian said clearly. "Second floor. Woman in active labour. Send paramedics now." He didn't wait for confirmation, just set the phone aside, removed his jacket, and spread it on the floor beneath Evelyn. All the power dynamics that had defined them dissolved in that moment. He was not a Mafia boss. She was not a maid. They were just 2 people bringing life into the world in the worst possible circumstances. "I need you to listen to me," Adrian said, voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. "I'm going to help you through this. We're going to deliver our daughter right here, together." Evelyn shook her head. "You can't. You don't know how. I delivered a calf once when I was 16. My father made me learn because leaders handle crisis." He pulled off his shirt, using it to cushion her head. "You're going to tell me what you need, and I'm going to give it to you. Understood?" Lightning flashed. Thunder followed, and Evelyn nodded. The next 40 minutes existed outside time, contractions that made her scream. Adrian's hand supporting her, guiding her, never leaving. His voice in her ear, steady and certain, talking her through each wave of pain, her fingernails digging into his forearms hard enough to draw blood. And finally, impossibly, their daughter, entering the world in that cold, dark, forgotten place. Adrian caught her with his bare hands, used his shirt to clear her airways, heard the first cry that meant everything was okay. Paramedics arrived 12 minutes later, finding a Mafia boss cradling his newborn daughter against his bare chest, while the mother lay exhausted on his jacket, both of them soaked and shivering, and more vulnerable than either had been in their entire lives. In the ambulance, racing toward the hospital, Evelyn finally spoke through tears. "I left to protect you, from having to choose, from losing everything because of me." Adrian looked at her with eyes that held exhaustion and relief and something that looked like awe. "You are my protection, Evelyn, from becoming what I was raised to be, from building an empire on fear instead of love, from dying inside while pretending to be alive." He took her hand, their daughter sleeping between them, born in a storm, delivered by hands that were supposed to destroy, not create. "I choose you," he said simply, "every time, forever." The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and new beginnings. Evelyn sat propped against pillows, exhausted but alert, watching Adrian hold their daughter with the careful intensity of someone handling something infinitely precious. Hope, they had named her in the ambulance. Both of them saying it simultaneously, slept in her father's arms, tiny fists curled against his chest, oblivious to the chaos her arrival had caused. 48 hours had passed since the storm, since the abandoned mill, since everything changed in the dark. The doctors had declared them both healthy despite the circumstances. Evelyn's blood pressure had stabilized. Hope weighed 6 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect. Miraculous. Adrian hadn't left the hospital room except to make phone calls he wouldn't discuss. The knock came at 3 in the afternoon. Catherine Blackwell entered wearing pearls and composure, carrying flowers that probably cost more than most people's rent. She stopped just inside the doorway, taking in the scene. Her son in a chair by the window, holding an infant wrapped in hospital blankets. looking at his daughter like she had rewritten every rule he had ever known. "May I come in?" Catherine asked quietly. Adrian looked at Evelyn. She nodded, though her body tensed instinctively. Catherine approached slowly, eyes fixed on the baby. When she stood close enough to see Hope's face, something in her expression cracked. "She's beautiful." "She is," Adrian agreed. "What's her name?" "Hope Catherine Blackwell." Catherine's breath caught her middle name. The gesture landed with weight neither of them acknowledged aloud. "May I hold her?" Adrian hesitated, then carefully transferred his daughter to his mother's arms. Catherine held Hope with surprising tenderness, and for a moment she looked like a grandmother instead of a calculating matriarch. "Bring them home," Catherine said, still looking at the baby. "Please, I was wrong about everything. Bring them to the estate. I'll make sure they're safe. I'll protect them myself." Adrian stood, moving to the window, hands in his pockets. "No." Catherine looked up sharply. "Adrian, you're adapting," he said calmly. "Not changing. You see a granddaughter and you're recalculating the cost-benefit analysis, wondering if accepting Evelyn is more strategic than losing me entirely. But the foundation remains the same. Control disguised as protection, manipulation wrapped in concern. That's not fair. It's accurate." Adrian turned to face his mother. "You told Evelyn you would kill her if she stayed. You drove her out of the estate, pregnant and terrified, because you valued legacy over her life. That doesn't disappear because you're holding a baby." Catherine's jaw tightened. "I was protecting you. You were controlling me. There's a difference." Adrian crossed back to Evelyn's bedside, taking her hand. "We're leaving the estate, building something new. Somewhere Hope can grow up without learning that love is a liability." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. "You're walking away from everything. From the family, from the business, from your inheritance, from your version of what I should be," Adrian corrected. "I'm building my own version. One where my daughter doesn't grow up watching her father become a stranger to himself." Catherine carefully returned Hope to Evelyn's arms, her movements precise, controlled. "Your father left me once. Did you know that?" Her voice stayed steady. "When you were 2 years old. He said I loved control more than I loved him, that I was raising you to be an empire instead of a person." Adrian's expression flickered with recognition. "I convinced him to come back," Catherine continued. "Promised I would change, be different, softer." She paused. "But I didn't change. I just got better at hiding who I was. And eventually, he stopped trying to leave. Stopped fighting. Just accepted that this was the price of the life we built." "And you watched him die inside," Adrian said quietly. "Watched him become exactly what you wanted. A perfect leader with nothing real left inside him." "Yes," Catherine met her son's eyes. "And I told myself it was necessary. That sacrifice built empires. That love was weakness." She looked at Hope sleeping in Evelyn's arms. "But watching you hold her, I see what I destroyed in your father, and I won't do that again." "Good," Adrian said, "because I'm not giving you the chance." The finality in his voice made Catherine flinch. "Where will you go?" "I purchased a house in Millbrook, 20 minutes from here. 3 bedrooms. Secure but not a fortress. Normal but protected." He squeezed Evelyn's hand. "Somewhere Hope can have a childhood that doesn't require armed guards and calculated alliances. And the business? I'm transitioning to legitimate security consulting, using the skills differently. The network stays, the methods change." Catherine stood very still, processing the complete dismantling of everything she had built.
You're serious.
Completely.
And if I ask you to reconsider,
"I'll tell you what my father should have told you 30 years ago. I love you, but I love them more, and I choose them." Catherine picked up her purse, her flowers, her composure. At the door, she stopped. "You're a better man than I raised you to be. I don't know if that's my failure or your victory." "Both," Adrian said. She left without another word. 12 days later, they moved into the house in Millbrook. 3 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a nursery painted soft yellow that Evelyn had chosen herself. Windows that didn't require bulletproof glass. A kitchen where neighbours could visit without security clearance. Normal. Revolutionary. Theirs. News of Adrian's departure from the estate travelled through their world like wildfire. Veronica heard it third hand at a family dinner where everyone pretended not to pity her. He had chosen the Maid, ended their engagement, left his empire, built a completely different life. Her humiliation was absolute. He had not just rejected her, he had rejected everything she represented, every value, every priority, every calculated choice that defined their world. She had lost to love, to someone who offered nothing but herself, to a woman who had been kneeling in her own hair while Veronica held scissors and believed she held power. 1 month after they settled into their new home, Catherine's car appeared in the driveway. No guards, no entourage, just Catherine, alone, carrying a single envelope. Adrian answered the door, hope asleep against his shoulder. "I'm not here to convince you to come back," Catherine said. "I'm here to ask if I can be part of her life, on your terms, with boundaries you set." She held out the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and legal documents transferring a trust fund directly to Hope. No strings, no conditions, no control. "What do you want in return?" Adrian asked carefully. Catherine looked at her granddaughter's sleeping face, and for the first time in 30 years, she answered with complete honesty. 3 months changed everything. Evelyn stood before the bathroom mirror in their Millbrook home, running her fingers through hair that had finally started growing back. Soft dark curls, maybe 2 inches long now, covering the patches where Veronica's scissors had left her exposed. It grew unevenly, some sections thicker than others, some still catching up. But it grew. She looked different, not just the hair. Everything about her reflection had transformed. The exhaustion had faded from her eyes. The fear had been replaced with something steadier. She wore jeans that actually fit, a sweater Adrian had bought her, no uniform in sight. Behind her, Adrian appeared in the doorway, Hope cradled in his arms. Their daughter had grown from 6 pounds to 12, her dark eyes alert and curious. Tracking movement with increasing focus, she gurgled softly, reaching for the light fixture above. "Ready?" Adrian asked. Almost. Evelyn turned from the mirror, smiling at the sight of them. "Is she fed?" "Fed, changed, and ready to charm your grandmother into complete submission." The word still felt strange. Your grandmother. Catherine Blackwell, matriarch of an empire, coming to their modest 3-bedroom house for supervised visits with a granddaughter she had once viewed as a liability. Today marked her 4th visit. The first had been tense. Catherine perched on their sofa like she was visiting foreign territory, holding Hope with careful precision, saying all the right words without quite meaning them. The second visit had been slightly easier. The third had included actual conversation about Hope's sleep schedule and Evelyn's online classes. Today felt different somehow. Catherine arrived at 2 o'clock exactly, carrying no flowers, no elaborate gifts, just herself and a leather journal she clutched like evidence. "Thank you for seeing me," she said to Evelyn at the door. They settled in the living room, Evelyn holding Hope, Adrian standing near the window, Catherine sitting across from them with the journal in her lap. "I've been meeting with a therapist," Catherine began, without preamble. "Twice a week for the past 2 months, working through patterns I've carried for 40 years. She opened the journal, pages covered in neat handwriting. "She asked me to identify the moment I chose control over connection. I found dozens, hundreds." Adrian's expression remained neutral, but he listened. "With your father," Catherine continued, looking at her son. "With you. With every relationship I've ever had. I convinced myself that control was love, that managing outcomes meant protecting people. That vulnerability was something to eliminate, not embrace." She closed the journal. "I was terrified of losing you, Adrian, so I held so tight I pushed you away, lost you anyway." The admission hung in the quiet room. Hope made a small sound, breaking the tension. "I'm not asking to move back into your lives fully," Catherine said. "I'm asking permission to be part of Hope's life. On whatever terms you set, with whatever boundaries keep her safe." She looked directly at Evelyn. "Including boundaries that protect her from me if I slip back into old patterns." Evelyn studied the woman who had driven her from the estate, who had threatened her life, who had valued legacy over humanity. But she also saw something she recognized, a grandmother who wanted a second chance, not to control, but to know, not to manage, but to love. "Supervised visits," Evelyn said carefully. "Here, in our home, 2 hours once a week. If Hope seems uncomfortable, the visit ends immediately. If you try to undermine our decisions or impose your values, the visits stop." Catherine nodded. "Understood." "And one more thing," Evelyn added. "You don't get to teach her that power comes from control. You teach her that power comes from choosing what matters, even when it costs everything." Catherine's eyes filled. "Deal." Later, after Catherine left and Hope napped in her crib, Evelyn found herself back at the bathroom mirror. She had been working on an essay for her online literature course, analysing themes of transformation in contemporary fiction. The irony was not lost on her. Adrian appeared behind her again, this time without Hope. He wrapped his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder, both of them looking at their reflection. "Your hair," he said softly, touching the growing curls with gentle fingers. "It's beautiful. But you were beautiful without it too, when you were kneeling on that marble floor." when you were running through a storm, when you delivered our daughter in an abandoned building. Beautiful the whole time. Evelyn leaned back against him, feeling the solid strength of his presence. I was terrified the whole time. Brave and terrified live in the same space. He turned her to face him. You survived something meant to destroy you. Rebuilt yourself. Started college at 26 while raising a newborn. Gave my mother grace when you had every right to refuse. That's not surviving. That's conquering. She looked at their reflection one last time. No longer a maid in someone else's mansion. No longer running through darkness with nowhere to go. Just a woman who had learned that dignity didn't come from how others saw her, but from how she saw herself. Hair grows back. Status shifts. Empires crumble. But the choice to love when it costs everything, that reshapes the world. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to choose between what's safe and what's right, drop a comment below. Share this with someone who needs to remember that transformation is possible even after devastation. And subscribe, because the stories we tell next will show you that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is rebuild yourself from nothing and call it everything. 3 months after the scissors fell, Evelyn Brooks stood in her own home, with her own family, building her own future. The scars remained, visible in the uneven curl pattern, invisible in the places fear had carved, but they were hers, proof she had survived. Evidence she had chosen love over safety, dignity over acceptance, truth over comfort. And in the end, that choice had given her everything the empire never could: hope, healing, home.